Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY called Retreat Howl Chapter 2. Where in the five howls did you come from? Run had been corralled and following Bradford and her fire team as they advanced behind the Humvee with a collection of other Marines. Along the way, he had found some weird stick thing with arcane inlays and a couple crystals from a fallen Keshman. He seemed much more secure carrying it. And what are you? We're aliens, brah, one of the Marines said. Run looked at him like he wasn't sure if he was merely putting on an effect for an idiot, or actually one. We're humans, Bradford replied, ignoring Stevens. She knew that he was an idiot. We came through the portal. Portal? What? He was interrupted by the thumping boom of the nearby Abrams main gun. The 120mm cannon was deafening, and the Kishman winced in pain, his mobile, tufted ears pricking erratically. One of the other Marines took pity on him and plopped a set of Mickey Mouse earmuffs on his head. They were not designed for his shape at all, and combined with the startled twitch and the head tilt of a sudden appearance, Bradford had to struggle not to laugh at him. Don't ask us, she continued as she adjusted the earmuffs and sighed in relief when the Humvee's Mar-Deuce fired a long burst. It just popped up 3 days ago. We have no idea where it came from. But the conversation was halted by a massive spell burst that struck the front of the Abrams to their right and exploded. The low concussive thump shook the earth and nearly threw Run and the Marines to the ground as it heaved the front of the tank up, sending dirt and rocks flying into the air. What the frick was that? Sergeant Gutierrez said, struggling to stand up as several more concussive thumps tore into the ground ahead of them. That was a channeled shard blast, Run replied, as dirt and debris rained down around him. I've seen those wipe out a whole pike formations, even with an artificer's support. He readjusted his Mickey Mouses and stood up. He was almost startled off his feet when the Abrams main gun fired. It's not dead. Those things can take a punch, Miller said, as the tank jerked forward, shuddering at first. It slowly powered into and out of the crater formed by the shard blast, then quickly returned to its previous speed. Bits of metal and armor and other debris were around the ground, but it remained functional. The Humvees were not so well armored, however. Another salvo rippled across the field, mostly hitting dirt, but not all. A Humvee opposite the Abrams took a direct hit, immediately crumpling in the front and before the vehicle exploded into a ball of fire and shrapnel. Jesus freaking crapballs, Kowalski shouted. Where in the frack did those things come from? The Archmagers at the center of the formations, Run replied, pointing at the splintery towers of gold and crystal scattered throughout the consolidating elven forces. Even as he spoke, pulses of light flickered across the towers. Incoming! Someone shouted, and Bradford's world heaved. A blast struck the ground just underneath the Humvees that were following. An explosion heaved the Humvee up, flipping it onto its side, while shards of energy ripped through the undercarriage. A Marine in the front of her legs had ripped off at the knee by a low-angled shard. Dirt rained around Bradford as she stared up at the sky, struggling to regain her breath. She had a brief flash of boot camp, trying to stampede at the bottom of the rope climb. The DI screaming at her, "Do you think you have time for a nap, Marine? Did you think that this was a freaking day spa? Are you just going to lie there and let your unit down, Marine? Or are you going to get the frick up?" Bradford heaved himself up over the clouds of dirt and bounced off her helmet. Coughing, she shoved the wool down and stumbled back to her feet. The Humvee was on its side, prevented from rolling onto its roof only by the armored turret enclosure. The left front wheel and the suspension were nothing more than a mangled twist of wreckage. Somebody was screaming. She stumbled towards the sound, past other Marines. Most were moving. Some weren't. Moving on instinct and roach training, Bradford dropped to her knees in front of the screaming Marine. Gutierrez, her squad sergeant. His left leg from just above the knee and down was gone. She was pretty sure that she could see it lying out of reach in the peripheral vision, but she refused to let herself look at it. "Corpsman," she shouted, ripping off her gloves. "Stay with me, Sergeant," she said, as she ripped the first aid kit out of its armor, fumbling the kit to open. She snapped the tourniquet out. "How bad is it, Jabs?" Gutierrez asked through gritted teeth. "I'm afraid you're not going to be winning any dance contests, Sergeant," Bradford said as she wrapped the tourniquet around the thigh and began tightening it, "because you're a rather terrible dancer." Gutierrez grit his teeth and beating the ground as Bradford finished torquing the tourniquet. Securing it, she was starting to pull the quick-clock gauze from the HM2, Olonrawaga, wrapped on her shoulder. "I'll take it from here, Jabs," he said. She stepped aside and let the big Nigerian do his job. "At least, buy me dinner first, Doc," she heard Gutierrez say as Alamuraga started pulling up on a pair of blue nitrile gloves, and was pale and sweating, and breathing was erratic. Trusting the FMF corpsman to do what he could for Gutierrez, Bradford turned to assess the situation. The Humvee had shielded most of the Marines from the blast, but not all of them. 3 of them were down. Coulson was definitely dead. Shrapnel to the face tended to do that to a person. McKimber and Alda were still alive and receiving first aid. That leaves me with 10 Marines combat ready, 8 of my squad, plus 2 pickup PFCs, HQ company fobbits by a look of them, and 1 alien foxcat. She paused, remembering that she was next to the line after Gutierrez. "And I'm in charge." Frick. She turned to the Humvee. It was nearly on its roof and definitely out of commission, but maybe survivors, and definitely ammo. "Stevens, Gomez, Dubois, get that Humvee open and haul out any survivors and ammo you find. Sampson, get on the horn and let whoever set up this field command know that we need a medivac." She turned to the fobbits, reading their nameplates. Clemson, Aldridge, help the doc with the wounded. She paused. Think. What else do we need to do? Get back to the fight. What about the artillery? Yet. What's the range on those things, and how often can they fire? The Kishman looked at her, still a little shell-shocked, but quickly shook his head clear, nearly dislodging his earmuffs in the process. "About 500 tails with a reasonable accuracy," he said, readjusting his earmuffs. "We haven't seen them shoot much in the past several hundred tails." Before blinking an unexpected unit of measurement, "I suppose I can't complain too much, as well as whatever translating magic has been translating everything else. How long is a tail?" Redden cocked his head to the air, his earmuffs wiggling as his ears moved inside of them. He gestured at his own tail, which he flicked in her direction. "About that long." After briefly considering subjecting him to the indignity of taking a measuring stick to his tail, she decided to eyeball it. "So, about a meter." She glanced at Kowalski and Edison. Ish, they agreed. "Corporal, medivacs inbound," Sampson reported. "Copy," she replied with the stepped up over the corner of the upturned Humvee and looked at the battlefield beyond. The rest of the Marines had continued on the low rise of the plain and howled it there. It wasn't much of a one, but it was high ground. 4 Abrams, 4 LRV-25s, and 12 surviving Humvees were pouring fire into the elves, along with most of the battalion of Marines. From what she could see between the dips and the rise, the elves were still falling back, consolidating their formations around the story-and-a-half tall, spindly towers that had fired their heavy artillery. The Vipers were still circling overhead, harassing the elves' flank, but they were producing some kind of heavy shield over those towers that seemed to be holding against the fire. As she surveyed the situation, she saw the formation of wizard types holding a rear guard with a storm of lightning spells. Small arms spellfire, she thought, that were putting up a tremendous fight, keeping an entire flank of humans in line, suppressing the barrage of fire, until they disappeared in a hailstorm of light, smoke, and dust. The irregular staccato of explosions reached her a fraction of a second later, followed by the A-10's distinctive battle cry, "Brrrr!" She looked up to see the 2 Air Force A-10s banking away from their gun run. When she looked back, there was a clearing, smoke and dust. A formation wizards were gone. She grinned. Bradford ducked back behind the Humvee just in time to meet the Stephens and Gomez helping another Marine that she didn't recognize out. Dubois crawled out after him, looking pale. "It's a mess in there, Jabs. Whatever that was punched through the belly armor and tore everyone up." He nodded at the dazed Marine. Franco here only survived because he was on the turret, but he banged his head pretty good on the roll. "I'm all right," Franco insisted, looking a little dazed. "Takes more than that to get through this thickhead." Bradford narrowed her eyes in skepticism. "If he can walk in a straight line for 10 paces and back, find him a weapon and ammo. Otherwise he stays with Doc and the other wounded." "Aye, Corporal," Dubois said, and led Franco away. "Aye yet," she said, waving him over. "About how many tails are those tower things on archmages, you said?" The Kishman stepped over, nodding. "The archmages in their mana towers. They are the other mages' mana crystals channeling energy through the towers for them to use, to generate shields and their heavy artillery, along with other spells." He swallowed. "They use our prisoners as living mana crystals. They don't want to have the mages or artificers. They just suck the life force right out of a person and leave them as a withered husks." "Don't get captured." "Copy that." She grimaced, seeing the hollow look in his eyes. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "About how far away are the towers?" Rin shook himself and had to readjust his earmuffs again. "Right." He leaned down in the corner of the Humvee. "About 600 tails, more like 620. He ducked back behind the Humvee and waggled his wizard stick at her. "Artificers have a good at estimating ranges, both for our own spells and to help guide artillery." "Yeah, that's about the distance I figured, between 600 and 700 meters. Bradford nodded. "How often can they fire? They haven't hit us with anything after those first 3 salvos." "I don't know for sure. We haven't had many victories, and the few that we have had, they destroyed their towers before we could capture them. If they didn't retreat with them," he considered it a moment, "we do know that they can only store so much mana at a time, and it takes time to replenish them. They should have fired again by now, though. It doesn't take them that long to recharge, not with an army like this. And the only times that I've seen them not fire the heavy artillery range is when—" "Tush!" He snarled. Whatever the epithet was, it didn't translate. He jumped up from behind the Humvee, pointing his wither stick in the direction of the humans' battle line. His eyes glowed silver along with arcane patterns of the staff as he muttered a few words under his breath. A sharp tilt of the staff and a wave of energy pulsed out of the end of the cone. Several formations of owls suddenly shimmered into existence between the wrecked Humvee and the rest of the battalion. "Ambush!" Bradford shouted, little more than 100 yards separating them from the rest of the advance force sent to bolster the Gandlan army. The elves were smack in the middle. A lot of elves, with a lot of glowing blades. Rifles shot crack out around her. "Die, mother truckers!" Kowalski shouted as he opened up with his saw. Bradford ejected the HEDP round chambered in a M203. "They're looking and shooting the wrong way. They won't hear or see them until it's too late." "Samson," she stowed the round in a dump bag and pulled out a smoke round. "Priority fire mission, hostiles ambush position on." She glanced at the color round before shoving it into the tube. "Red smoke, danger, close." A flick of the sights to adjust for range. Swoop! She watched as the round arced through the air as she reloaded on reflex. It fell right into the middle of the elves, bouncing off a helmet of one of them, before bursting into a deep red column of smoke. "Ha! Take that, you fricker!" She knelt down and started putting her own rounds down range, careful to keep her aim low enough to not hit the rest of the unit on the other side. She saw a dull flash of Ayat and Kowalski and the other 2 saw gunners as the squad laid down a continuous stream of fire with talking guns. Whatever hesitation had been caught before that trigger the ambush the elves had wore off. She heard the distinct orders being barked, and several formations of elves started moving in their direction, while others headed for the rest of the battalion, and a hail of spellfire was hurled their way. It would never reach them. The pulsars, like white traces, raced down them and to deflect up several yards ahead of them. The angle was shallow but noticeable, and most importantly, It was enough to deflect the small shots that the elves in a few feet above their heads. Bradford glanced at a yacht. He was holding his wizard stick out before him, pointing towards the elves. He had a look of intense concentration on his face, and his eyes and the staff were glowing silver. With a shrug, she made a note to thank him later, and sent an HEDP round downrange. Swamp! Corporal, fire mission confirmed, danger close, ETA 20 seconds. Fire mission, danger close, take cover, Bradford shouted, before grabbing a yacht and pulling him down behind the Humvee with her. She hit the deck, and her yacht landed on top of her with a yipped oof, and Bradford rolled on top of him, as she had body armor with a wrap around Kevlar inserts and ballistic sappy plates. His armor was made of linen. The Cashman artificer had enough time to yip a protest. Then the world exploded. There was no distinct crackles, pops, or bangs, just a continuous roar. It lasted a bare handful of seconds, but seemed to go on forever. The roar of destruction paused for a heartbeat, then resumed for another multi-second eternity. The noise ended just in time for Bradford to hear the blessed sound of angels trumpeting the sky. Brrrt, brrrt. Eat some freedom, mother truckers! Hurrah! Kowalski, you freaking motard, I love you. Ha! Jabs, we don't see each other anymore. Edison and I are getting married. Kowalski, go frick yourself. Every day. Bradford couldn't help but laugh as she rolled off her yacht, who had renewed his protest at being squished under the more than 200 pounds of marine and kit. Check to see if there's any still alive before they walk over and turn us into shish kebab, you fricking dumbass. Nah, they're all dead. I stayed and watched. Kowalski, you're fricking insane. Hey, at least I'm fricking somebody, he said as he sauntered over, Saul casually propped over his shoulder. Speaking of which, Shields, that was an awesome kick with the whole magic missile deflecting thing, but dude, you really need to buy her a dinner first. What is it with you people and buying dinner? End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. If you wish to support the author, there is a link to the original story, so pop over there and give him your support. If you wish to support this channel, however, there are a few ways to do so. The best and easiest would be to share this video with other people, as well as liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of these things tell the algorithm that this channel is at least vaguely interesting, and that may share it with other people. If you wish to support the channel in some other manner, watching my other videos would also help tremendously. Or, if you really like, there is a link down below to leave a tip or to join the Patreon. Any and all support is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all have a good one until the next time, and I'll see you then. Cheers.